a forbidden marriage, a prince's possessive obsession, and a farmer's desperate fight for freedom. What happens when love becomes a prison? Secrets lie beneath every glance, and the stakes are higher than ever. Will he escape or be consumed by the prince's dark hole? Chapter 1. The Royal Decree. Caden had always lived a simple life, one where the land he worked was his only concern, where the rhythm of planting and harvesting marked the passing of time. His father had been the same, quiet, steady, with a weathered face that seemed permanently set into a frown of both exhaustion and wisdom. Caden's life had been molded in the quiet corner of the world, and he had never known that the crown of Virnos could reach so far, or have such a cold, unyielding grip. The letter came on a morning too bright to match the heaviness in his chest. He had just finished burying his father, the earth still damp with the weight of grief, when the royal messenger arrived. The parchment in his hands was heavy. He could feel the gold seal pressing against his palm, mocking him with its weight, as though it were too much to bear. The king's decree was brief, as most royal letters were, but its meaning was clear and unrelenting. Caden's eyes skimmed over the words once, twice, before they blurred into a haze. He couldn't breathe. The letter claimed he was to marry Prince Dorian of Virnos, a marriage decreed by the king himself. It was not a request. It was not even a command. It was a fact, an irreversible chain of events set into motion by the hand of someone far above him. His father had died, and now this. At first, Caden thought it was some cruel joke. How could it not be? He was the son of a farmer, his hands rough from toil, his mind filled with thoughts of the land and the crops, not the splendor of a royal palace. He had never been to Virnos, never seen the prince, never thought such a life would ever be his. The prince was the stuff of stories, a figure that never touched the earth, only floating above it in some untouchable realm. But there was no mistake in the letter, no room for misinterpretation. The king had signed it, the royal seal unmistakable. The ink was still fresh, a cruel reminder of how quickly the world could change, of how small Caden had become in the face of such immense power. The silence around him was suffocating as he reread the letter, his fingers trembling. It had been a week since his father's death, and now this. Caden's grief was like a heavy cloak suffocating him. But this was another kind of weight. The life he had known was over, replaced by something unrecognizable, foreign and terrifying. His mind spun. Why him? What did he have to offer a prince? His hands were calloused, his skin sunburned, his heart full of sorrow. He wasn't the kind of man a prince would marry. He was a farmer's son, unworthy of such attention. But the letter didn't ask him to make a choice. It simply told him what was to come. Caden was no longer his own. His life had been stolen in a single stroke of a royal pen. The thought of it crushed him, and for a moment, he simply stood there, staring at the letter, unable to move, unable to think. A whirlwind of emotions churned inside him. Anger, disbelief, fear, and the gnawing ache of a loss that had nothing to do with his father's death, but everything to do with the death of his freedom. His life, it seemed, had already been decided. A sharp knock at the door broke his reverie. It was the messenger again, his eyes respectful but cold. "The carriage awaits, Master Caden," he said. For a moment, Caden couldn't respond. He stood there, the letter still clutched in his hand, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, none of them making sense. The world outside seemed to have forgotten him, and he was expected to leave it all behind. His father's land, his home, everything. Without a word, he turned away from the messenger, eyes falling on the old wooden tools his father had used. Tools that now felt like relics of a past that would never be his again. Caden could feel the weight of the kingdom, the weight of the prince, and the crushing finality of his fate. And then, with a final glance at the life he knew, he turned to face the unknown. Chapter 2. The arrival at the palace. The carriage rumbled over cobbled streets, its wheels groaning with every bump as they drew closer to the heart of Vernos. Caden sat in the back, his hands pressed tightly against his knees, the letter still heavy in his pocket. He had tried to push his thoughts away during the long journey, tried to tell himself that it was just a dream, some strange nightmare he would soon wake up from. But as the gates of the palace loomed larger, reality sank in like a stone in his gut. The palace was nothing like the small cottages and farmhouses of his village. It was a fortress, towering, imposing, and too grand to comprehend. Its marble walls gleamed in the fading sunlight, as if the entire structure were a monument to something unholy. Caden's heart raced in his chest. He could feel the eyes of the guards and servants on him as he was ushered through the grand entryway, his every movement a reminder that he didn't belong here, that he was an outsider in this world of wealth and power. Inside, the air was cold and sterile, the floors gleaming like glass, and the high ceilings seemed to swallow any sound. Caden's boots clicked against the stone, the echo reverberating in the silence. His mind spun in confusion, trying to piece together what was happening, what was expected of him. But all he could think about was how small and insignificant he felt, how lost he was in this palace of ice and gold. He was led through winding corridors, past tapestries and paintings of kings and queens he didn't know, past servants with faces that seemed to blur into one another. His eyes darted around, searching for something familiar, something to anchor him, but there was nothing. It was as though the very air here was designed to make him forget who he was. Every step took him further from the life he had known, further from his father's land, further from himself. Then he was brought to a large, ornate door, its frame carved with intricate patterns of roses and thorns. The servant knocked once before opening it, stepping aside to allow Caden to enter. His heart pounded in his chest as he crossed the threshold into the chamber beyond. Prince Dorian was seated at a long, dark wooden table, his back straight, his eyes focused on some document in front of him. He didn't look up when Caden entered, didn't acknowledge his presence at all. Caden stood frozen in the doorway, unsure of what to do or say. The prince was exactly as he had imagined. Tall, fair, with sharp features and a look of quiet authority that seemed to fill the room without him lifting a finger. There was something regal about him, something that made Caden feel even more out of place. After a long, drawn-out silence, Dorian's gaze finally lifted from the paper, and his eyes met Caden's. They were colder than Caden had expected. Distant, calculating, as though he were sizing him up, measuring his worth like one would measure a piece of livestock. His lips parted, but instead of offering the warmth of a greeting, his voice came out with a chilling indifference. Caden, I presume? The way Dorian said his name felt like an accusation, like something that didn't belong, something to be tolerated rather than welcome. Yes, Your Highness, Caden managed, his voice weak. He bowed slightly, unsure of the protocol, unsure of anything. The room seemed to close in around him, and he felt a sudden urge to flee, to run out of this place and never look back. But he was trapped, wasn't he? Dorian regarded him for a long moment before nodding. You may sit. His hand gestured to a chair across from him, his movements deliberate and slow, as if he were in no rush to offer even the smallest bit of hospitality. Caden sat, his body stiff and tense, feeling the weight of the prince's gaze on him. Dorian didn't speak again for a moment, and the silence was oppressive, as though they were both trying to navigate an invisible boundary between them. I won't interfere with your life, Dorian finally said, his voice low, as though he were speaking more to himself than to Caden. I have no interest in forcing you into anything. Caden blinked, not sure what to make of that. Was this supposed to be a kindness? A comfort? Dorian's words were laced with such detachment that it left him more confused than reassured. If the prince didn't want to force him into anything, then why was he here? Why had this marriage been decreed? The prince's aloofness only heightened the tension in Caden's chest, filling him with both a strange relief and a sense of foreboding. "You will have your own rooms, of course," Dorian continued, as if the marriage was nothing more than an arrangement between two strangers, something to be dealt with swiftly and without emotion. "You can do as you wish here, within the bounds of the kingdom's expectation." Caden nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. How could he possibly have any life here, any independence, when the very air seemed to press down on him, demanding submission? And yet, Dorian seemed so uninterested in him, in anything beyond his own plans. It was like being in the presence of a storm that refused to show its fury. The prince's coldness both freed him and chained him at the same time. For the first time, Caden allowed himself to look around the room. The stone walls were draped with heavy, dark curtains, blocking out the natural light, leaving the room dim and suffocating. There were no windows, no warmth. Everything about the room felt deliberately distant, carefully constructed to make him feel small, insignificant. Dorian's voice pulled him back to reality. "You will attend a banquet tomorrow evening. It's customary for royal guests to meet with the rest of the court. I expect you to be there." "Of course, Your Highness," Caden said, his throat tight. He didn't care about the banquet. He didn't care about any of this. But he didn't know how to say it. Didn't know how to escape the suffocating expectations that seemed to loom over him at every turn. Dorian gave a small nod, his eyes narrowing slightly. There was something unreadable in his gaze, something dark lurking just beneath the surface. "Very well. You may go now." Caden stood, his legs unsteady as he bowed again. As he turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Dorian's coldness hadn't been a dismissal, but a test. It had been a subtle, deliberate push to see how far Caden would bend, to see if he would resist or accept his place here. And as Caden stepped out of the room, he realized with a sickening jolt that he had no idea which one he would do. Chapter 3. The Wedding Day. The palace had never seemed so oppressive as it did that morning. The air was thick with anticipation, a pressure that clung to Caden's skin like the heavy layers of ceremonial clothing they had dressed him in. He could feel the weight of every stitch, every jewel, every thread pulling him further into a life he hadn't chosen, one that he wasn't sure he was capable of living. He stood before a mirror in the bridal chamber, staring at his reflection. The man who looked back at him was not the same boy who had worked the land, not the same son who had buried his father just a few days ago. His eyes were wide, haunted, as if he could barely recognize himself. The gown was a simple affair by royal standards, elegant but understated. But the veil, the crown of silver and sapphire, and the layers of silk made him feel as if he were drowning in grandeur. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the veil, feeling the pressure of the day, the pressure of what was about to happen. A soft knock at the door broke his reverie. Caden turned, his chest tight, and the door creaked open, revealing a woman dressed in royal livery. "Your Highness," she said, her voice as crisp and formal as the rest of the palace. "It's time." Caden's breath caught in his throat. His heart raced as he nodded, though he wasn't sure whether he was nodding for her, for the palace, or for himself. It felt as though every part of him was being swallowed whole by this moment, and there was no way to escape it. The procession to the grand hall was long, winding through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Every footstep echoed like a countdown in his ears, each second leading him closer to something that felt like a trap. He tried to focus on his breath, on the dull thud of his heart, but all he could think about was what awaited him at the altar. The grand hall was suffused with light, its high arches towering above him, casting long shadows across the polished stone floors. The air was heavy with the scent of roses and incense, the flickering candles casting an ethereal glow over the sea of guests who lined the walls. Lords, ladies, nobles, and courtiers all turned their eyes to him as he entered, their gazes sweeping over him with an almost predatory interest. He could feel them judging him, assessing him, as if he were some object on display. At the far end of the hall, standing tall and unmoving, was Prince Dorian. The prince was dressed in a black and silver tunic, his dark hair swept back neatly, his expression as impassive as ever. He was the picture of regal detachment, a man who seemed untouched by the world around him, as if he were above it all. And yet, as Caden's gaze locked onto his, there was something else there, a glimmer of something darker, something possessive. Dorian's eyes narrowed slightly as Caden approached, but he said nothing. His face remained a mask of indifference, but Caden could feel the weight of his presence, the force of his gaze. As Caden reached the altar, a quiet murmur ran through the crowd. He wasn't sure if it was because of him or the prince, but it made his skin crawl. His heart pounded in his chest, his hands sweating as he placed them together, trying to steady himself. The ceremony was long, drawn out with vows and speeches that meant nothing to him. The words, the ritual, it was all just a blur of tradition, an empty formality. He barely registered the priest's voice, the whispered prayers, the blessings. All he could think of was the coldness of the stone beneath his feet, the relentless weight of the situation pressing on him from all sides. And then, at last, the moment arrived. The priest's voice echoed in the hall. "Do you, Caden of Vernos, take Prince Dorian as your husband, to honor, cherish, and obey him for all the days of your life?" Caden's breath hitched. His throat was dry, his pulse quickening. He wanted to say no, wanted to run, to scream, to throw himself from this gilded cage. But the eyes of the court were on him, the weight of the royal decree on his shoulders. He couldn't escape, not now. I do," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. The words felt like a betrayal, not just to himself, but to the memory of his father, to the life he had known. And yet he spoke them anyway, because what else could he do? His choice had already been made for him. The prince's eyes remained fixed on him, and as the crown was placed upon Caden's head, he caught the briefest flash of something sharp, possessive, even cruel, in Dorian's gaze. It made Caden's stomach twist. The priest turned to Dorian, his tone reverent. "And do you, Prince Dorian of Vernos, take Caden as your husband, to honor, cherish, and possess him for all the days of your life?" Dorian's eyes flickered with something dark, a hint of satisfaction that Caden could almost feel like a physical weight. He was the prince. He could command armies, could order the death of those who displeased him. But today he was simply marrying Caden, marrying him as though he were a prize, a possession to be claimed. "I do," Dorian said, his voice low and steady, the words rolling off his tongue like a declaration of ownership. Caden's breath caught in his throat, but before he could react, Dorian's gaze softened ever so slightly, just enough for Caden to wonder if it was all part of some game, some cruel facade to mask the underlying hunger that Caden could almost taste in the air. The kiss was cold, a mere brushing of lips, a formality, and yet it felt like a claim. Dorian's hand cupped the back of Caden's neck, pulling him just a little closer than necessary, as though testing how far Caden would allow him to go. Caden flinched but didn't pull away. He had no choice. The hall erupted in applause, but it sounded distant, as if from another world. Caden stood there, frozen, his heart still racing, his mind a mess of confusion and fear. The prince pulled back, his eyes searching Caden's with an inscrutable expression. "Welcome to my life," Dorian said softly, his voice carrying just enough edge to make Caden shiver. Caden didn't respond. What was there to say? There was nothing left to do but follow, to let himself be led into the future that had already been written for him. Chapter 4. The First Night. The palace was eerily quiet that night, the silence pressing down on Caden like a weight. The halls were dimly lit by flickering candlelight, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with every step he took. The weight of the day, the wedding, the ceremony, the crowd of strangers, all of it felt suffocating. He had barely spoken to anyone since the vows had been exchanged, and now, as he walked through the empty corridors, he couldn't help but feel the oppressive isolation of it all. The door to their chambers creaked as Caden pushed it open, his heart already pounding in his chest. The room beyond was grand, far more luxurious than he had ever imagined, with silken curtains, velvet cushions, and a massive four-poster bed draped in dark fabrics. It was a room fit for royalty, fit for someone like Prince Dorian. But for Caden, it felt like a prison. He stepped inside, unsure of what to do, his mind spinning with confusion and fear. He glanced around, half expecting Dorian to already be there, waiting, but the room was empty for the moment. The silence only seemed to deepen his anxiety. It wasn't long before Dorian entered, his tall figure filling the doorway. His dark eyes seemed to gleam in the dim light, his presence both commanding and cold. He shut the door behind him with a soft click, his gaze sweeping over Caden with a detached air. "You look," Dorian said, his voice low, almost thoughtful, "like a man who's already lost." Caden swallowed hard, the words striking him like a physical blow. He didn't respond, unsure of how to frame the bitter truth of his feelings. He felt lost, trapped, suffocated by the weight of this marriage, by the oppressive expectations, by everything he had been thrust into without warning or consent. But what could he say? What could he do? He had no power here. Dorian's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer before he walked toward the bed, his footsteps deliberate, as if he were taking his time, savoring the moment. "You can have the bed if you like," he said casually, as though offering a favor. "I don't sleep much." Caden stared at him, the words hanging between them. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Dorian had no interest in sharing anything, not even the bed they were supposed to sleep in as husband and husband. And yet, there was something unsettlingly possessive in the way he said it, as if he were claiming it for himself in some unspoken way. Dorian began to unbutton his tunic, his movements slow and precise. Caden couldn't look away, his mind still reeling from the events of the day. He should have said something, should have made some kind of protest, but the words caught in his throat. What good would it do? Dorian didn't care about his discomfort, his confusion, his pain. To the prince, Caden was simply an obligation, a possession to be displayed, not a partner. "I don't want you to think this is..." Dorian began, his voice almost softer now, as if considering his words carefully. He paused, his eyes meeting Caden's. "I don't want you to think this is some kind of love match. That's not what this is." Caden looked at him, his heart aching with a strange mix of anger and sorrow. "Then what is it?" His voice came out rough, his throat tight with the words he had been holding in all day. "What is this, Dorian? You don't care about me. You don't care about anything but what you can control." Dorian's eyes flickered for a moment, something dark passing through them before he masked it again with that familiar indifference. He took a step closer to Caden, his presence enveloping the room, his scent sharp and cold like winter air. "This is what the kingdom demands," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You are my duty, Caden, and you will learn to accept that." Caden flinched at the word duty. It stung like a slap, cutting through the fragile thread of hope he had been clinging to all day. His mind raced. This wasn't just a marriage. It wasn't about love, or even respect. It was about control, about power. Dorian's power, his right to do whatever he pleased. And Caden? He was nothing more than an object, a means to an end. Do you think it will always be like this? Caden asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. That I'll just bend to your will? That I'll accept this life as my own? Dorian didn't answer immediately. He took another step toward Caden, his gaze intense, his jaw clenched. I don't expect you to accept it right away, he said quietly, almost too calmly. But you will. In time. Caden's pulse quickened. His chest tightened with a mix of fear and something else. Something he couldn't quite identify. I won't, he spat, his voice shaking. You can't just own me, Dorian. I'm not some piece of property to be shoved around. Dorian's lips twitched into the smallest, most condescending smile. You'll learn. His voice dropped lower, and Caden could almost feel the weight of the words pressing against him. You'll learn that it's easier to give in than to fight. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Caden stood frozen, his mind racing, his heart hammering in his chest. There was no escape. Not here, not now. Dorian moved past him, his presence still looming large in the room, and sat on the edge of the bed, looking at Caden with a quiet intensity. I won't force you into anything, he said, almost too softly. But I expect you to understand your place. You are my husband, whether you like it or not. Caden's anger flared again, but he swallowed it down. He didn't want to give Dorian the satisfaction of seeing him break, of seeing him crumble under the weight of his control. He had to hold on to something, even if it was just his dignity. I understand, he said, though the words felt hollow, empty. Dorian's eyes flickered for a moment, something unreadable in his gaze. He didn't reply, didn't move, but the tension between them was almost unbearable. It was a game to him, Caden realized. A game where he was always going to be the loser, where his emotions were nothing more than pawns in Dorian's hands. And so as the night stretched on, Caden lay in the bed, staring up at the ceiling, his thoughts swirling in a storm of confusion and anger. He wasn't sure what Dorian wanted from him, but he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. And he was already drowning. Chapter 5. A wall between them? Days passed in the palace like they did anywhere else, but here they felt endless. The oppressive silence that had haunted Caden's first night had only grown thicker, a wall between him and the world he once knew. He spent his mornings in his chambers, wandering through the halls, but never truly free. His every movement felt scrutinized, his every interaction monitored. The sense of being watched, always watched, gnawed at him like a persistent ache in his chest. Dorian never came to him unbidden. He never asked him to spend time together, never showed the slightest interest in what Caden was doing. But when Caden was around others, particularly other men, he could feel it. The weight of Dorian's gaze, cold, calculating, possessive. It started with small things. Caden noticed that when he spoke to a servant, Dorian would appear from the shadows, as though summoned by some unspoken alarm. A fleeting glance from across the room, a slight narrowing of the prince's eyes, and then he would walk away, leaving Caden feeling as if he had been marked. At the royal banquet a week after the wedding, Caden felt it most acutely. The court was alive with music and laughter, the clinking of glasses filling the air. It was supposed to be a celebration of the union between the prince and his bride, but all Caden felt was the cold weight of 1,000 eyes on him. He had managed to slip away from the heavy formality of the event, finding a quiet corner of the garden. The night was crisp, the scent of jasmine and rose mingling in the air, a brief reprieve from the suffocating tension of the palace. Caden leaned against a stone fountain, his eyes closed, trying to clear his mind, when he heard footsteps approaching. It was a young man, a noble from one of the surrounding regions, someone Caden had seen at the banquet but didn't know well. He was smiling, clearly tipsy from the wine, and he seemed entirely too eager to strike up a conversation. "You're the new prince's husband, aren't you?" the young man said, his voice light and teasing. "Caden, if I remember correctly." Caden glanced up, startled but trying to mask his discomfort. "Yes, that's me." The noble's smile grew wider, and he leaned in a little too close, his breath laced with alcohol. "You're quite a sight, you know. I'm sure the prince is very happy with his choice." Caden took a step back instinctively, the closeness of the man making his skin crawl. "I thank you, but I—" Before he could finish, a cold voice cut through the air. "Is there a problem here?" Dorian stood in the shadows of the garden, his eyes locked on Caden and the young noble with a cold, unnerving focus. His posture was rigid, his gaze like a blade. The noble looked up at Dorian, startled, his face turning pale as he stammered an apology and quickly excused himself. Caden's breath hitched as Dorian stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Caden's face. "I thought I told you to stay away from people like him," Dorian said, his tone soft but deadly. "You belong to me, Caden. Don't forget that." The words stung, but what stung more was the unspoken truth behind them. The possessive claim in his voice, the implication that Caden was nothing more than an object to be shielded from the world, as if he were a prize to be kept in a glass case. Caden opened his mouth, ready to say something, anything, but the words died in his throat. What was there to say? What could he say to the man who already controlled everything in his life? Instead, he stood there in silence, his gaze dropping to the ground. Dorian didn't wait for an answer. He simply turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Caden in the quiet of the garden, feeling more alone than ever. The following days were no better. Caden had tried to find some semblance of normalcy, to speak with the other guests, to explore the palace, but every time he did, Dorian was there, always in the background, watching. His eyes followed Caden's every movement, lingering a little too long, a little too intensely. It was like a shadow that never left, always hovering just behind him. One afternoon, Caden found himself in the library, looking for an escape from the growing tension in the palace. The walls were lined with towering bookshelves, the air thick with the scent of parchment and leather. Caden moved along the aisles, running his fingers along the spines of books, lost in the quiet comfort of the library. He had always loved to read, to lose himself in stories that took him far from his own life. He was so absorbed in the shelves that he didn't hear Dorian approach until the sound of his footsteps broke the silence. Caden froze. "Did I not make myself clear?" Dorian's voice was soft, but there was an edge to it. The tension in the room immediately thickened. Caden turned, his heart hammering in his chest. Dorian was standing by the entrance, his expression unreadable, his eyes cold as always. But there was something in the way he was looking at Caden, something darker, that made Caden's pulse quicken with unease. "I don't want you talking to anyone," Dorian said, his voice flat but demanding. "I don't want you making friends or socializing. You're mine, Caden. That means you don't belong to anyone else." Caden's chest tightened with a mix of anger and confusion. "I'm not your property, Dorian," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "I'm not something you can control." Dorian's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenching as he took a step forward. "You're mine, whether you like it or not," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And if you keep pushing me, I'll show you just how much you belong to me?" Caden flinched, his throat dry. There was no mistaking the threat in Dorian's voice. It wasn't physical, not yet. But it didn't need to be. The emotional manipulation, the control, the possessiveness, it was more than enough. He backed away from Dorian, his mind a whirl of emotions. This was what he had been fearing, the reason he had felt the walls closing in around him from the very beginning. There was no freedom here, no escape. Dorian stepped closer, his presence suffocating, his eyes dark with something Caden couldn't quite decipher. I'm not the one who will suffer if you continue to resist, Caden, Dorian said quietly, his tone eerily calm. You will? Caden's breath caught in his throat, and for the first time, he wondered if there was a way out of this life. But even as the thought crossed his mind, he knew the answer. There was no escape. Not now. Not ever. Chapter 6. The Possessive Prince. The royal gala was in full swing, the air thick with laughter and chatter. The ballroom shimmered with gold and crystal, candles flickering in their ornate candelabras, casting warm pools of light across the floor. Music floated through the air like a sweet, haunting lullaby, and the scent of wine and perfume mingled together in a heady haze. Caden stood near the edge of the room, trying to blend into the shadows, a glass of wine in his hand that he barely touched. He had learned to avoid the center of attention ever since the wedding, had learned that in this world, to be noticed was to be scrutinized. The nobles, the courtiers, they all whispered behind their fans and handkerchiefs, their gazes heavy with judgment. They would smile and nod at him, but their eyes always lingered a second too long, as though waiting for him to crack, to reveal his discomfort. It didn't matter that he was the prince's husband. To them, he was still just a farmer's son, a pawn in a game that they didn't quite understand but knew would have consequences. He sighed, looking down at his wine, wishing for some kind of escape, when a voice broke through his thoughts. Caden, is it not? He turned, surprised to find a woman standing before him, her expression warm but calculating. Her gown was a striking shade of emerald green, and her dark hair was pinned up with delicate jewels. She was one of the noble women who often visited the palace, and Caden had seen her around on occasion, but they'd never spoken. She smiled, stepping closer to him. I don't believe we've had the pleasure of proper introductions. I'm Lady Seraphine. I've heard so much about you. Caden forced a polite smile, trying to hide his unease. Lady Seraphine, Before he could finish, he felt a shift in the atmosphere. A sudden, biting chill seemed to sweep through the room. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Caden's gaze shifted instinctively toward the far side of the room, and his stomach sank. There, standing near the grand staircase, was Prince Dorian. His eyes were locked onto Caden, and though he wasn't looking at Lady Seraphine directly, Caden could feel the weight of his stare. It was a heavy, possessive look, like a wolf eyeing its prey. Caden's breath caught in his throat, and his heart began to pound in his chest. Dorian's gaze never wavered. The look was cold, calculating, and something darker lingered in the way his eyes narrowed. He didn't move immediately, but the tension in the air was palpable, suffocating. Lady Seraphine, apparently unaware of the shift, continued to talk, her voice light and airy. I imagine it must be such a change for you, Caden. From farm life to this, royalty splendor. Must be quite the adjustment. Caden nodded absently, his attention still fixed on Dorian, who was now making his way toward them with slow, deliberate steps. His presence seemed to fill the room, every step echoing in Caden's mind like a warning. Lady Seraphine, noticing his distraction, turned to follow his gaze. Her smile faltered just slightly when she saw Dorian approaching. She straightened up, a small flicker of recognition crossing her features. Dorian reached them a moment later, his movements smooth and confident. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't need to. His mere presence commanded attention. His gaze shifted briefly to Lady Seraphine, and Caden could feel the subtle shift in his demeanor. The prince's lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. Lady Seraphine, Dorian said, his voice smooth but laced with an icy edge. How delightful to see you again. Seraphine offered him a small, polite curtsy, but her eyes lingered on Caden, noticing the change in atmosphere. Dorian's gaze flicked back to Caden, his eyes darker now, something predatory lurking behind them. There you are, Caden, Dorian said, the words smooth, almost too calm. I've been looking for you. The possessiveness in his tone was unmistakable, like a leash snapping tight around Caden's chest. He tried to swallow the tightness in his throat, but his mouth went dry. He could feel Lady Seraphine's gaze flicking between the two of them, sensing the tension in the air, but she didn't speak. Before Caden could respond, Dorian's hand reached out, fingers curling around Caden's arm with firm but possessive grip. It wasn't a gesture of affection, nor was it a casual touch. It was as if Dorian were staking his claim, marking his territory in front of everyone. "Excuse us, Lady Seraphine," Dorian said, his voice sharp. "I believe Caden and I have unfinished business." Lady Seraphine nodded, her expression unreadable as she stepped back. "Of course, Your Highness. I'll leave you two to it." With that, Dorian began to pull Caden away from the crowd, leading him toward a quieter part of the ballroom. Caden's heart raced in his chest. He had no choice but to follow, his arm still held firmly by Dorian's hand. It was as if the prince had marked him as his, made sure that everyone saw exactly who he belonged to. They reached the far end of the ballroom, where a set of glass doors led to a small balcony overlooking the gardens. Dorian pushed them open with a swift motion, stepping out into the night air. Caden stumbled slightly as he was pulled along, his head spinning from the sudden shift in atmosphere. Once they were outside, Dorian released his grip on Caden's arm, but his presence still loomed over him like a shadow. "Do you enjoy speaking with others?" Dorian asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Do you enjoy the attention of the court?" Caden's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to protest, to say something, but the words wouldn't come. His body felt rigid, caught between fear and anger, unable to move. Caden began, his voice shaky, but Dorian cut him off. "You're mine, Caden," Dorian said quietly, stepping closer. "I don't share what's mine." The words hit Caden like a blow to the chest. His eyes widened as he looked up at Dorian, who seemed completely calm, almost eerily so, as if this was a natural statement, a fact that didn't require explanation. Caden opened his mouth to argue, to say something, anything. But the look in Dorian's eyes stopped him. There was no room for defiance here, no room for escape, just the crushing weight of Dorian's control. "You will learn," Dorian said softly, as if to himself. "This is how things will be, Caden. This is how we will be." Caden's heart twisted in his chest, but there was nothing he could do. His voice felt small, weak in the face of Dorian's dominance. "I don't want this," he whispered, though he knew Dorian wasn't listening. But the prince's gaze softened, just slightly, before he stepped back, breaking the silence. "We'll see," Dorian said. "We'll see." Chapter 7. Emotional Struggles. The days that followed the gala felt like a blur to Caden, long drawn out and full of tension. Every glance from Dorian, every subtle shift in his mood, felt like it was designed to unsettle him. But it wasn't just the prince's possessiveness that kept Caden on edge. It was the small moments of vulnerability that slipped through Dorian's carefully constructed mask, moments that left Caden confused, and, for the first time, questioning everything he thought he knew about the prince. It happened on a quiet evening when Caden was wandering the palace gardens alone, seeking respite from the suffocating weight of the palace. He hadn't seen Dorian for hours, and for once, he allowed himself to breathe, to simply exist in the space between the chaos of his new life. As he passed the ornate fountains and manicured hedges, the evening air thick with the scent of jasmine, Caden caught sight of Dorian sitting on a stone bench, his back to the path. The prince's head was bowed, his posture slumped in a rare display of weariness. For a moment, Caden hesitated, unsure whether he should approach, unsure if Dorian even wanted to be bothered. But something, an instinct he couldn't quite explain, compelled him forward. The soft crunch of Caden's footsteps on the gravel made Dorian look up, his eyes sharp, as though he had been expecting someone. But the familiar coldness in his gaze was missing, replaced with something quieter, more guarded. Caden stopped a few paces away, unsure how to approach him. The tension that always seemed to surround Dorian was still present, but tonight it felt different, muted, like it was being held back by some invisible force. "I didn't think you'd be out here," Caden said, his voice soft, careful. Dorian's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile, but his eyes remained distant. "I didn't think you would notice." Caden took a hesitant step closer. "You've been different lately," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He didn't know what had caused him to say it. Maybe it was the way Dorian's mask seemed to crack for just a moment. Or maybe it was the way Dorian had been so distant, so cold in a way that felt almost too calculated. But whatever the reason, Caden couldn't help but speak the truth. Dorian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up at the sky, as if searching for something in the clouds. The moonlight cast a soft glow across his face, and Caden saw something in his eyes that he hadn't seen before. A flicker, something. Pain? Regret? "Things have never been easy for me," Dorian finally said, his voice quieter than usual, as though the weight of the words were heavier than he was willing to admit. Caden frowned, unsure of how to respond. "I don't understand," he admitted. "What do you mean?" Dorian's gaze shifted back to Caden, his eyes cold once again, but there was a tension in his expression that Caden couldn't ignore. "You don't understand because you weren't raised the way I was," Dorian said, his tone flat but tinged with something darker. "You don't understand the weight of duty, the expectations, the burden of being the prince." Caden stood silently, his mind reeling. He had heard whispers of Dorian's upbringing, of the cold, unfeeling nature of his father, the king, who had demanded perfection from his son. But hearing Dorian speak of it with such a quiet bitterness, it made Caden feel something. Sympathy, maybe, or perhaps just confusion. "What is it that you want from me, Dorian?" Caden asked, his voice low, a tremor running through it. "You claim I'm yours, but you treat me like I'm nothing more than a piece of property. You don't even try to connect with me." Dorian's jaw tightened at the words, and for a moment Caden thought he might lash out, but instead he exhaled slowly, almost defeated. His gaze softened just slightly, though it was still guarded. "I don't know how to do that, Caden," Dorian admitted, his voice rougher now. "I don't know how to be anything other than the prince. How to be human." Words hung between them like a fragile thread, and for the first time, Caden saw the cracks in Dorian's perfect facade. It was a rare vulnerability, one that made Caden's chest tighten with empathy, even as his anger swirled beneath the surface. Dorian wasn't just a cold, calculating prince. He was a man shaped by the weight of his birthright, by the suffocating expectations of the royal family. He was a man who had never known how to be anything other than what was demanded of him. "Dorian, you don't have to be perfect," Caden said, his voice quieter now, softer. "You don't have to be this thing that your father wanted you to be. You don't have to push me away to protect yourself." Dorian's eyes flickered with something close to regret, something raw and unspoken, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He turned his gaze away, his features hardening once more. "It's not that simple," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Caden didn't know what else to say. The silence between them stretched on, thick and uncomfortable, like the air in a room that had been shut off from the outside world for too long. Finally, Dorian stood up, straightening his back and returning to his usual cold composure. "You should return to your chambers," he said, his voice back to its usual commanding tone. "I don't need your pity, Caden." Caden swallowed, a knot forming in his stomach. "I wasn't pitying you," he replied, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. I don't want to feel like I'm invisible to you." Dorian didn't respond. Instead, he turned, walking away from Caden without another word. The prince's steps were purposeful, his figure growing smaller with each passing second. Caden watched him go, his heart heavy with the weight of everything left unsaid. Chapter 8. The Power Struggle. The days were no longer simply long. They were becoming suffocating, each one stretching into the next like an endless, inescapable loop. Caden spent more time in his chambers now than he ever had before, wandering the opulent rooms with no real purpose. He had no friends here, no allies to speak of. His only company was the constant presence of Dorian's watchful eyes, always lurking just out of sight yet never far away. Dorian's jealousy had become more apparent in the last few days, sharp and cold, and it no longer felt like something that could be ignored or brushed off. The prince had begun to assert his control in more blatant ways. There was the constant shadowing of Caden's movements, the way he would appear at any event or gathering that involved Caden speaking with someone else, particularly another man. Dorian would be there, always watching from a distance with that unreadable expression on his face. It wasn't just possessiveness anymore. It was control. Caden had begun to notice the small things. How? If Dorian saw him laughing with another courtier, he would make sure to interrupt, positioning himself between Caden and the other person, his hand resting on Caden's arm just a little too long. How, when Caden spoke to one of the servants or attendants, Dorian would appear from nowhere, his gaze cold, his silence deafening. Caden hated it. The suffocation of it all, the feeling of being constantly watched, like an animal in a cage. But despite the resentment that burned inside him, there was also something else, something tangled and confusing. Every time Dorian looked at him with those intense, possessive eyes, there was a flicker of desire, of something more, that Caden couldn't quite shake. It made his skin prickle, his heart race with confusion. Was it anger? Attraction? Fear? Fear? Or all of it? It wasn't until the royal banquet that the breaking point came, when Caden finally found himself pushed to the edge. The event was grand, even by royal standards. The ballroom was full of laughter and music, the clinking of glasses and the rustle of silk dresses. It should have been a night to celebrate, but for Caden, it felt like another carefully crafted spectacle where he was nothing more than a pawn on display. As the prince's husband, he was expected to stand beside Dorian, to smile and nod, and pretend everything was fine. But it was impossible to ignore the way Dorian kept a possessive grip on him, how he seemed to draw an invisible line around Caden, daring anyone to cross it. It was during a conversation with a foreign diplomat that Caden felt it, Dorian's presence behind him, looming like a storm cloud. He turned slightly, glancing over his shoulder, and saw Dorian standing a few feet away, watching him with narrowed eyes. It was subtle at first, but as the conversation with the diplomat continued, Caden began to feel Dorian's gaze on him more intensely, a weight pressing down on his shoulders, making him feel small, like a child caught doing something wrong. The diplomat, sensing the shift in atmosphere, excused himself politely and moved away. But Caden could still feel Dorian's eyes on him, cold and calculating. He swallowed hard, his pulse quickening as the distance between them closed. Before he could react, Dorian was standing before him, his face as unreadable as ever. "You're getting too close to people again," Dorian said, his voice quiet but sharp. "You know what I've told you about that." Caden's chest tightened. The anger that had been bubbling beneath the surface finally began to rise. He had had enough of being controlled, of being treated like a thing to be possessed. The walls that had been building inside him started to crack, and for the first time he spoke without thinking. "I'm not yours to control, Dorian," Caden said, his voice shaking with the force of his words. "I don't belong to you, no matter how much you want me to." Dorian's expression remained unchanged for a moment, his jaw tightening as he looked at Caden with a mix of frustration and something else, something darker. Then slowly his lips parted, and his voice was barely a whisper. "You're wrong. Dorian said. "You are mine." The words hit Caden like a physical blow. There was no room for debate, no room for defiance in Dorian's voice. It was an undeniable fact in his eyes, a truth that Caden couldn't escape. And for the first time, Caden understood, truly understood, that Dorian wasn't just speaking about a marriage or a legal bond. He was speaking about ownership, about control. But instead of retreating, instead of stepping back as he had done countless times before, Caden felt something inside him snap. The anger, the frustration, the confusion. It all coalesced into something new. A need for self-preservation. A desire to fight back, to stand up for himself, even if it meant facing the consequences. "No," Caden said, his voice firm now despite the tightness in his chest. "I won't be your possession, Dorian. I won't be treated like some object for you to control." Dorian's eyes flickered with a moment of something. Surprise? Anger? Before his features hardened again. "You don't have a choice," he replied quietly, his voice dark and low. "You will learn your place, and you will come to understand that everything I do, every move I make, is to keep you, to protect you." Caden felt his chest tighten. Protect me, or keep me caged? The words hung between them like a challenge, and for a moment, Dorian didn't respond. His gaze darkened, but Caden could see the flash of something else there. A crack in the cold, calculating mask Dorian wore so carefully. "You're wrong," Dorian said again, his voice quieter now, though still intense. "I'm not trying to cage you. I'm trying to keep you safe. But if you keep pushing me, Caden, you'll force me to show you just how far I'll go to keep you." Caden's heart raced, but instead of feeling fear, he felt a strange, burning determination. He had to fight. He couldn't keep letting Dorian control every aspect of his life. He couldn't be trapped in this gilded cage, no matter how powerful or demanding Dorian was. "I don't want your protection," Caden said through gritted teeth. "I want my freedom." Dorian stepped closer, his eyes fixed on Caden with an intensity that made the air between them electric. "You'll never be free of me," he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. "Not now, not ever." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them seemed to fade into nothingness, the noise of the ballroom muffled in the background. Caden's heart pounded in his chest, a storm of emotions swirling inside him. Fear, anger, frustration, and yes, even something else. Something he couldn't quite name. And then, without another word, Dorian turned and walked away, leaving Caden standing there, shaken, his breath coming in sharp gasps as the weight of the prince's words settled over him. Chapter 9. The Hidden Desire. The following days after the confrontation at the royal banquet felt like an unsettling calm. The tension between Caden and Dorian was palpable, like an unspoken storm hovering just above them, threatening to break at any moment. But for the first time, Caden felt something different in the air, an odd sense of stillness that made everything feel fragile, as if one wrong word could shatter the delicate balance between them. Dorian hadn't spoken much to Caden in the days that followed. It wasn't unusual. He often retreated into his own world, his own thoughts, leaving Caden to fend for himself. But this time, there was a coldness in Dorian's distance that seemed to cut deeper, a wall between them that felt even thicker than before. Caden had spent most of his time in the gardens, wandering aimlessly through the labyrinth of hedges and stone pathways. The peaceful solitude offered a brief escape from the suffocating tension inside the palace, and it was there alone that he tried to process everything, the power struggle, the manipulation, the strange pull he still felt toward Dorian, despite everything. But then, one evening, as he walked along the garden's edge, he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't have to turn around to know it was Dorian. There was something about the weight of his presence that made the air feel thicker, heavier. Without saying a word, Dorian came to stand beside him, his gaze fixed on the setting sun as it cast a warm golden glow over the flowers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft rustling of the leaves in the evening breeze. Finally, Dorian broke the silence. "You are angry with me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, one that hung in the air between them like a challenge. Caden turned his head, studying Dorian carefully. The prince's face was calm, as always. But there was something in his eyes. Something deeper, something that flickered in the shadows of his gaze. "I'm not angry," Caden said softly, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm just confused. I don't understand you, Dorian. You claim to care about me, but everything you do, it feels like control, like you're trying to make me into something I'm not." Dorian's jaw clenched at the words, but he didn't look away. Instead, he took a step closer, his posture rigid, like he was bracing himself for something he knew was coming. "You don't understand what it's like to have your every move watched," Dorian said, his voice low, his tone carrying a quiet bitterness that Caden hadn't heard before. "You don't understand the pressure of always being perfect, of having to be everything everyone expects you to be. I was never given the choice to be anything other than the prince. And I thought that if I could make you mine, if I could keep you close, I could keep you safe. But all I've done is drive you away." Caden's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected Dorian to speak so openly, so honestly, about the things that tormented him. There was no coldness in Dorian's voice now, no calculating distance. It was raw, vulnerable. "I don't want to be your possession, Dorian," Caden said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to be my own person. I want to make my own choices. But you don't let me. You hold me so tightly, and it's suffocating." Dorian's eyes darkened, and for a moment, it felt like he was about to retreat, to hide behind that impenetrable mask of his. But instead, he stayed, his gaze locked onto Caden's, as if he were trying to search through him, trying to find something in Caden's eyes that would tell him what to do next. "I'm scared, Caden," Dorian admitted, his voice cracking slightly, a rare break in his otherwise controlled demeanor. "I'm scared that if I let go of you, if I don't keep you close, I'll lose you, and I can't lose you." Caden's breath caught in his throat. The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. "Scared. Lose to. You don't have to control me to keep me close," Caden said softly. "I don't want to be trapped, but if you let me in, if you stop trying to hold me like a prisoner, maybe I could be with you." For a long moment, Dorian didn't speak. He stood there, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that shifted. Something that spoke of a deep internal battle. Finally, he took a slow step forward, closing the space between them, and Caden's heart pounded in his chest. "I don't know how to love you any other way," Dorian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've never known anything other than control. I've never known anything other than obsession." Caden's breath hitched. The words struck him harder than he expected, and for a moment he wasn't sure how to respond. Obsession. Was that what this was? What Dorian felt for him? The possessiveness, the jealousy, the strange intensity? "I don't want to be your obsession," Caden said quietly, his voice filled with a mix of fear and longing. "I want to be someone you can care about, not someone you can own." Dorian's eyes softened, and for a moment, Caden could see the flicker of something beneath the surface, something raw, something tender. "I care about you more than I ever thought I could care about anyone," Dorian confessed, his voice rough. "But I don't know how to stop myself, Caden. I don't know how to let go of this need to possess you." Caden reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against Dorian's hand. The contact was fleeting, almost hesitant, but it was enough. Dorian didn't pull away. Instead, he looked down at their hands, a conflicted expression crossing his face. I'm not asking you to let go of me, Caden said softly, his voice gentle. But you have to stop trying to control me. I need to be free. I need to make my own choices, but I don't want to leave you. I just want you to let me breathe. Dorian's eyes met his, and for the first time, Caden saw something in the prince's gaze that he hadn't seen before. A flicker of hope. I don't know how to give you that, Dorian admitted, his voice heavy. But I'll try. Caden swallowed, his heart pounding in his chest. There was still so much between them. So much confusion, so much pain, but for the first time, there was also something else. Something that felt like a beginning. Chapter 10. The breaking point. The tension that had been building between Caden and Dorian for weeks finally came to a head on a cold, unforgiving evening. It wasn't one single event that caused it. It was the culmination of everything that had been left unsaid, every moment of restraint and silent suffering. The power struggle, the jealousy, the hurt. Everything had been simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. Caden was in his chambers when it happened. The sun had long since set, and the soft light from the hearth flickered in the dim room, casting long shadows across the walls. He had just finished dinner, the silence of the room pressing in on him as he sat by the fire, lost in thought. But then came the knock at the door, a quiet, firm knock that sent a jolt of unease through him. Before he could answer, the door swung open, and there stood Dorian, his silhouette framed by the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes. Something dark, something that made Caden's heart skip a beat. I need to speak with you, Dorian said, his voice low and clipped. Caden stood up, feeling the familiar rush of anxiety rise within him. What is it, Dorian? He asked, his tone cautious. He knew that something was coming. He could feel it in the air, like the calm before a storm. Dorian stepped into the room, his eyes never leaving Caden. There was no warmth in his gaze, no trace of the vulnerability he had shown in the garden. Instead, his expression was hard, controlled, like a man bracing for a confrontation. You've been distant, Dorian said, his voice tight though his jaw was clenched. I can feel it. You've been pulling away from me. I can't keep pretending that things are fine when they're not. You don't understand what you're doing to me, Caden? Caden's chest tightened. What do you mean? I don't understand. You're the one who's been pushing me away, Dorian. You keep saying that you care about me, but all I feel is your control, your need to own me. I can't keep living like this. The words came out harsher than he intended, but they were the truth that had been eating at him for weeks, and now, standing face to face with Dorian, he could no longer hold it back. Dorian's eyes flashed, his face darkening. Control? You think I've been controlling you? His voice rose, sharp and brittle. I've done everything for you, Caden. I've tried to protect you, to keep you safe. And all you do is push me away, like I'm some kind of monster. Caden felt his pulse quicken, the anger building inside him, but he stood his ground. You're not a monster, Dorian, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. But you've treated me like a prisoner. You think you're protecting me, but all you're doing is suffocating me. I don't want your protection. I just want to be free. Dorian's face twisted in frustration. He took a step toward Caden, closing the distance between them in one swift movement. The air between them crackled with tension, and for a moment Caden thought Dorian might reach out and touch him, but he didn't. He just stood there, staring at Caden with an intensity that made the room feel too small. I don't want to lose you, Dorian said, his voice barely above a whisper. There was a rawness to his words that took Caden by surprise. You don't understand how much I need you, how much I care for you, but you keep pushing me away. You keep pulling away from me like I'm not enough. Caden's heart twisted at the pain in Dorian's voice. The prince was trembling, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, Caden saw the man beneath the mask. The vulnerable, desperate person who was terrified of losing control, terrified of losing him. "I'm not pushing you away because I don't care about you," Caden said, his voice softer now, though the anger still simmered beneath the surface. "I'm pushing you away because I don't know who I am anymore, Dorian. I don't know how to be me when you're always trying to make me something I'm not. You don't see me, you see what you want me to be." Dorian's expression faltered, and for a brief fleeting moment, Caden saw the truth. His own insecurity, his fear, his longing. It was a crack in the carefully constructed facade, and Caden felt the weight of it hit him like a wave. "I don't know how to stop," Dorian whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to let go of you. I don't know how to love you without trying to control everything. I'm scared, Caden. I'm terrified of what will happen if I let you go." Caden's heart ached at the vulnerability in Dorian's words, but it only added to his confusion. He felt torn between the man who was so afraid of losing him and the man who had made him feel like he was losing himself. "You don't have to let me go," Caden said, his voice thick with emotion. "But you have to stop trying to own me. You have to let me be free." Dorian looked at him for a long moment, his face unreadable, his eyes searching Caden's, as if looking for something, some sign that he wasn't too late. But then, without another word, Dorian turned and walked toward the door. Caden's heart pounded in his chest as Dorian paused at the threshold. "I can't change who I am overnight, Caden," he said, his voice strained. "But I will try. I will try for you." The door closed behind him with a soft click, and for a long moment, Caden stood there, his chest rising and falling with each shaky breath. He had expected a confrontation, but he hadn't expected this raw, unfiltered vulnerability. Dorian had shown him a side of himself that was both terrifying and heartbreaking, and Caden wasn't sure what to make of it. But one thing was clear. Their relationship had reached a turning point. There was no going back now. They were both too entangled in their own emotions, their own fears, to walk away from each other completely. The question was, what would they do with the truth they had finally shared? Chapter 11: Embracing the Chaos. The days that followed their confrontation felt like a delicate dance, awkward, uncertain, and filled with an almost tangible tension that neither of them seemed able to escape. Caden kept to himself more than usual, retreating into the quiet spaces of the palace, finding solace in the solitude of the gardens or his chambers. There, he could breathe without the constant weight of Dorian's presence pressing down on him. But even in the silence, the memories of their exchange lingered like a heavy fog. Dorian, for his part, had become more reserved than usual. He still hovered around Caden, his eyes constantly watching, his gaze now tinged with something different, less cold, less possessive, but still overwhelming. It was clear to Caden that the prince's attempts at control hadn't disappeared entirely. They had simply shifted. He was no longer trying to own Caden in the same way, but there was still something in his behavior that spoke of an ongoing struggle. It was one evening, after a week of this fragile, unspoken truce, that things finally cracked again. Caden had been walking along the palace corridors when he turned a corner and found himself face to face with Dorian. The prince was standing in the shadows, his posture stiff and unreadable. His eyes met Caden's with an intensity that made Caden's pulse race. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," Dorian said, his voice rough, as if he'd been carrying a burden he could no longer bear. "I've been trying so hard to do the right thing, to give you space, to let you breathe. But I'm still afraid. I'm still afraid of losing you." Caden's heart twisted at the rawness in Dorian's voice. He could hear the fear, the desperation, the same vulnerability he had seen in the garden days earlier. But this time there was something more, a shift, something deeper than before. I don't want to leave you, Dorian, Caden said, his voice quiet but firm. But I need you to stop treating me like a prize you can win. I can't be that for you. Dorian's gaze darkened, his jaw clenched. You think I see you as a prize? That's not it, Caden. You think I'm just some jealous, controlling man, and He stopped himself, his hands balling into fists at his sides. I don't know what to do with this. With you, with us. There it was again. The truth they both feared. The raw, aching truth that neither of them had the answers to. The chaos of it all was overwhelming, suffocating in a way that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I know you're trying, Caden said after a moment of silence. But trying isn't enough if you don't let me in. You can't control everything. You can't lock me up in this palace, away from the rest of the world, and expect me to just be okay with it. Dorian took a step closer to him, his expression hard but something softer behind his eyes. I'm not trying to lock you away, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I'm trying to protect you from the things you don't understand. The dangers, the world out there. You're not safe out there, Caden. Caden could see the pain in Dorian's eyes, the fear that was buried beneath the layers of control. And for a moment, he understood. He understood the lengths Dorian was going to, trying to keep him safe, trying to shield him from the harsh reality of the world outside the palace walls. But Caden wasn't a child. He didn't want to live in a gilded cage. I'm not a prisoner, Dorian, Caden said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm a person. A man with my own thoughts, my own desires. I want to be free. I want to live my life. The words hung between them like an impossible choice, and Caden saw something in Dorian's eyes that he hadn't seen before. A glimmer of something more than possessiveness. It was desire, yes, but it was also something deeper, something Caden wasn't sure he was ready to face. I know you don't want this, Dorian said, his voice breaking, his usual confidence faltering. I know you don't want me, not like this, but I can't just turn it off. I can't stop feeling what I feel for you, Caden. Caden's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. The tension between them was thick, nearly suffocating. But there was something raw and real in Dorian's words. Something that made Caden's chest ache. I don't know what to do with you, Caden admitted, his voice shaky. I don't know what this is. I don't know what we are. But I can't pretend that I don't feel something for you. I don't know if it's love. Maybe it's just the chaos of it all. But I can't ignore it. Dorian's eyes flickered, a flash of something, hope, relief. It was gone almost as quickly as it came, but Caden saw it, and it left a mark on him. Dorian stepped closer, until they were almost chest to chest, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. I don't know how to love you, Dorian said, his voice a low rasp. I've never known how to love anyone. But I can't let you go, Caden. I won't. I don't know what this is either, but I need you. Caden's heart was pounding now, his emotions a whirl of confusion, desire, anger, and something else, something he didn't want to admit. He didn't want to be trapped. He didn't want to be owned. But at the same time, there was something in Dorian's eyes, something that pulled him closer. I need you too, Caden whispered before he could stop himself. It was the truth, even if it was a messy, chaotic, terrifying truth. And in that moment, everything between them changed. The walls that had held them apart, those walls of fear, of control, of uncertainty, began to crumble piece by piece. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and it wasn't even a solution, but it was a step forward, a step toward embracing the chaos that was their bond. Caden didn't know what the future held. He didn't know what this strange, complicated relationship would become. But for the first time, he felt like he had a choice. A real choice. And that, for now, was enough. Chapter 12. The Choice. The palace was quieter than usual, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Caden stood by the window looking out at the distant horizon. The gardens below were bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, and for the first time in weeks, Caden felt a sense of stillness settle over him. But it wasn't a peaceful stillness. It was the quiet before the storm, the calm that came with making a decision that would change everything. Behind him, he could hear the soft rustling of silk as Dorian entered the room, his presence filling the space. The prince hadn't said much since their last conversation, but Caden knew he was still there, still lingering, still waiting. The weight of everything between them, every unsaid word, every fear, every desire, was like a pressure that neither of them could escape. Dorian's voice broke the silence. "Have you decided?" Caden didn't turn around immediately. He couldn't. The choice he faced was one that had been building for so long, one that had been waiting for him to take control, to choose which path he would walk. But the truth was, Caden wasn't sure if there was a clear path at all. Turning slowly, he faced Dorian, his heart pounding in his chest. The prince stood just inside the door, watching him with those eyes that had once been cold and calculating, but now were filled with something far more vulnerable. He was waiting, as if he too was on the precipice of something important, something that would change them both forever. "I don't know," Caden said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what the right choice is, Dorian. I don't know if there's even a right choice." Dorian's expression didn't change, but there was something in the way he held himself, something tense, something that spoke of the control he had been fighting to keep. "There never was a right choice," Dorian said quietly. "We both knew that from the beginning. We can't go back. We can only move forward." Caden swallowed hard. He had thought about this moment for days, nights filled with restless tossing and turning, his mind racing with the weight of everything they had been through. He had tried to convince himself that he could leave, that he could escape the suffocating pull of the palace, of Dorian. But with every passing day, the realization became clearer. The choice wasn't about freedom. It wasn't about escaping Dorian. It was about accepting him, and the complicated, messy love that they shared. "I don't want to lose myself," Caden said softly, taking a step toward Dorian. "I don't want to lose the part of me that's still me. But I don't know if I can keep running from this. From you." Dorian's eyes softened, and he took a step forward, his gaze never leaving Caden's. "You don't have to lose yourself, Caden. Not with me. You never have to. I've never wanted to take who you are away from you. I've just been afraid. Afraid that if I let go, if I gave you the space you needed, I'd lose you. Completely." Caden's heart thudded in his chest, and the pain, the confusion, the fear that had been building between them began to unravel, thread by thread. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was seeing Dorian clearly, not as the prince who ruled from his throne, but as the man who had been lost in his own need, his own insecurity. "And I've been afraid too," Caden admitted, his voice low, his gaze shifting to the floor. "Afraid of being trapped, afraid of being owned. But the truth is, I don't know if I can walk away from you. Not anymore, even if I'm still scared." Dorian's lips parted, and he took a step closer, his breath shaky. "Caden." Caden lifted his gaze to meet Dorian's, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and something else. A pull he couldn't explain, a pull he didn't want to ignore. "I'm not asking for perfection," Caden said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I'm not asking for everything to suddenly make sense, but I need to be with you, even if it's messy, even if it's chaotic. I need to try." Dorian's chest rose and fell with a deep breath, and for a moment it seemed like he might say something, But instead, he reached out, his fingers brushing against Caden's cheek. The touch was gentle, tentative, as if he was unsure if he had the right to touch him. Caden didn't pull away. "I don't know if I can be what you need," Dorian said softly. "I don't know if I can be the man you want me to be. But I will try. I will try for you." Caden closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of Dorian's hand on his skin sink in. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't ideal. But it was real. "I'm not asking for perfection either," Caden whispered. "I just need you to try. We both need to try." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Dorian smiled. A small, uncertain smile, but it was enough. It was the first genuine smile Caden had seen from him in so long, and it made his heart flutter with the hope of something more. "You're right," Dorian said softly, his thumb brushing across Caden's skin. "We have to try. Together." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was filled with understanding, with a new kind of peace, one that was fragile yet promising. Neither of them had all the answers. Neither of them knew where this relationship would lead, but they were willing to take the next step, to face the unknown together, no longer afraid to face the chaos of their bond. Caden reached out, taking Dorian's hand in his. The touch was warm, grounding. It was an unspoken promise. There was still so much they didn't understand, so much they had to learn about each other. But in that moment, Caden knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone anymore. They had found each other in the mess of it all. And that was enough, for now. End of story.